There is a truth so deeply buried beneath the glitter of self-help culture, most never realize they're trapped by it until it's too late. You've heard the mantras, good vibes only, stay positive, choose happiness. But what if I told you that relentless positivity could be one of the most spiritually destructive forces of our time? It doesn't look like poison, it looks like light. You won't see warning signs. You'll see pastel quotes on Instagram, smiling influencers in yoga poses, motivational speeches that silence anything not wrapped in sunshine. But underneath that brightness, something is being denied, something essential, something sacred. This isn't just about suppressing feelings. It's about severing your connection to truth, depth, and the raw signals your soul is trying to send. It's about weaponizing optimism to escape discomfort, even when discomfort is the very door to transformation. Toxic positivity doesn't just ignore pain, it makes pain feel like failure. And the moment you start believing that your suffering makes you spiritually less than, you begin to hide, to shrink, to wear a mask made of light, while your truth dissolves in shadow. Later in this video, I'm going to show you the moment I realized positivity had turned into a cage, a moment so subtle and so common that you might not even see it coming. But once you do, you'll never look at good vibes only the same way again. So stay with me, because what we're about to uncover is something the light tried to hide. It didn't begin as a lie, it began as a whisper of hope. In a world drowning in chaos, suffering, and uncertainty, the idea that we could choose happiness felt like a revolution. And at first, it was. People began to challenge old narratives of victimhood. They learned about the power of thoughts, the impact of beliefs, the science of gratitude. It worked, until it didn't. What started as a healing tool became a spiritual performance. Suddenly, expressing sadness was seen as weakness. Doubt was low vibration, anger was toxic energy, and anyone not radiating peace 24/7 was labeled unawakened, unhealed, unworthy. This wasn't growth, it was repression, dressed as evolution. We began to bypass the sacred storms inside us, to silence grief with affirmations, to paint over trauma with pastel quotes. And worst of all, we started judging each other for being human. Spirituality became a filter, not a mirror, a place to curate peace, not confront shadow. And in this curated world of endless smiles, the pain didn't go away. It just learned to hide deeper where healing couldn't reach it. If you've ever felt like your darkness made you spiritually broken, that's not truth speaking. That's the voice of spiritual shame, disguised as positivity. And if it's ever made you feel alone, you're not. The more we pretend to be fine, the less we actually are. Toxic positivity doesn't just silence emotions, it teaches you to distrust them, to see sadness as a threat, to see fear as weakness, to see grief as something to fix rather than something to honor. Over time, you stop listening to your inner signals. You override your own instincts. You smile when you want to scream. You stay when your soul wants to run. You say, "I'm okay," so often, you forget what truth even feels like. You become disconnected, not from others, but from yourself. And the irony, you might still look spiritual. You might still post quotes about light and love, but inside, you feel hollow, ashamed, unseen, because the part of you that's hurting isn't being met, it's being managed. But healing doesn't happen through management, it happens through meeting. So if any part of this resonates, if you've ever felt like you had to smile through pain just to be accepted, you're not alone. Drop a comment and tell me your truth, not the filtered version, the real one. And if you're ready for more unfiltered depth like this, subscribe now. We're only just beginning to reveal what's been hidden behind the light. Why do we fear darkness so much? Because we were taught it means danger. That discomfort means we're off track. That sadness is a problem to fix, not a presence to witness. But what if the darkness isn't trying to destroy you? What if it's trying to deliver you? Most of our resistance to pain comes not from the pain itself, but from the belief that we shouldn't feel it, and so we fight it, avoid it, drown it in distraction or deny it with fake light. And over time, that resistance creates fragmentation. We split off from parts of ourselves, from our grief, our rage, our confusion, and anything we split from starts to control us from the shadows. That's the real danger of toxic positivity. It doesn't just silence pain, it feeds it. It turns spirituality into a performance, growth into a brand, and inner truth into something inconvenient. But truth doesn't go away when ignored. It waits, patiently, until one day it cracks through your false light like lightning in a meditation hall. And when it does, you either let it in or pretend harder. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes the moment you stop pretending. When you finally say, "I'm not okay," and realize the sky doesn't fall. In that space, the healing begins, because pain doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be felt, witnessed, held without shame. This is not indulgence, it's integration. When you stop bypassing your sadness, you start hearing what it's been trying to say. When you let grief speak, it tells you what mattered. When you honor your fear, it shows you where you're still protecting a wound. This is shadow work, but not in the aesthetic sense, not crystals and candles. Real shadow work is messy. It's crying in silence. It's sitting in a parked car not knowing what to pray for. It's feeling your rage rise and choosing not to turn it inward. This time, it's the sacred practice of no longer abandoning yourself when things get uncomfortable, because maybe the highest vibration isn't peace at any cost, but honesty at all costs. That's when light returns, not as performance, but as presence. Long before hashtags and healing retreats, mystics knew something we've forgotten, that darkness isn't the opposite of light. It's where light is born. In every ancient tradition, from Sufism to Taoism to Gnostic texts, the descent into shadow was not avoided, it was honored. The desert fathers went into silence, not celebration. Shamans entered the underworld, not retreats. Even the mythic Jesus, before resurrection, descended into the tomb, because all transformation begins in the dark. We modern seekers flipped the script. We made light the goal and darkness the enemy, but in doing so, we severed the path to real growth. Toxic positivity tells you to raise your vibration. Wisdom tells you, descend first, into the parts of you that ache, into the memories you buried, into the truths that tremble behind your smile. Because only when the seed disappears into soil does anything sacred begin to grow. And what if your sadness isn't a setback? What if it's initiation? What if your anxiety isn't dysfunction, but the spirit's alarm system telling you something isn't aligned? You don't rise by avoiding the dark. You rise by becoming conscious inside of it. That's where the light gets real. Maybe the real danger of toxic positivity isn't that it hides your darkness, but that it makes you afraid of your depth. When we glorify high vibes and demonize struggle, we forget that gold is mined from deep within the earth, not found floating in the sun. The soul doesn't evolve through perfection, it evolves through presence. And presence isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's sitting with your sorrow without needing to fix it. Sometimes it's telling the truth you've never said out loud. Sometimes it's letting your anger exist without rushing to label it as low vibration. What if spiritual maturity isn't about staying positive? What if it's about staying honest? Not every day is a sunrise. Some are storms. And yet, both shape the forest. Both move the river. Both make you real. So if this message resonates, if you've been craving a space where truth is louder than performance, drop a comment and tell me how positivity has shown up in your life. When did it help? When did it hurt? And subscribe if you're done with shallow light. We're here for depth now, and there's more to uncover. True light doesn't come from avoiding the dark. It comes from making peace with it. The deepest healers aren't the ones who radiate perfect calm. They're the ones who've sat with their storms and stayed. They've cried in silence, screamed in private, and come out the other side. Not cleaner, but clearer. Because light isn't purity, it's presence. You know it when you feel it. Not because it's glowing, but because it doesn't flinch in the face of pain. And once you've felt that kind of light, you stop craving the fake kind. You stop posting quotes to cover your sadness. You stop forcing smiles when your soul is tired. You stop pretending to be healed just so others don't get uncomfortable. You become honest. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. And in that honesty, there's a light so subtle, so steady, that even the darkest room can't unmake it. You start to trust yourself again, not because you're always positive, but because you're present with all of it. And the parts of you that once felt unworthy, unseen, too messy for love, they begin to breathe again, because you're not hiding anymore. What if spirituality was never meant to be an escape, but a return? A return to the parts of you you've silenced, the child who wasn't allowed to cry, the teenager who buried rage, the adult who learned to smile while falling apart. Spirituality isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. That kind of path isn't glamorous. It's quiet, messy, unfolding not in mountaintop retreats, but in your living room at 2 a.m. when no one's watching and the mask is off. And here's the irony. When you stop trying to raise your vibration just to prove you're healed, your vibration actually rises. Because it's rooted, not forced. You grow differently when you're no longer afraid of your shadow. You become trustworthy, not because you're flawless, but because you're integrated. This is where real alignment begins. Not in constant joy, but in consistent truth. Not in suppression, but in wholeness. And maybe that's what the soul was craving all along. Not positivity, but permission. So if you've ever felt like your pain disqualified you from being spiritual, know this: you weren't broken, you were bypassed by a culture that feared the dark and taught you to fear it too. But the dark was never the enemy. It was the womb, the cave, the place all transformation begins. You are not meant to glow all the time. You are meant to cycle, to deepen, to unravel and rebuild 1,000 quiet times before the world ever sees you shine. And that shine, it will be different now. Not a performance, not a brand, not curated for Instagram, just a presence, steady, real, the kind that holds space for others because it no longer runs from itself. So let this be your permission to grieve, to rage, to question, to pause, and when the light returns, as it always does, let it find all of you, not just the parts that smile. If this video made something stir inside you, don't let it fade. Comment your truth, not the polished version, the real one. And subscribe if you're done chasing light. Because here, we don't escape the dark, we listen to it.